214, a forest road northeast of Kreminna, Luhansk Oblast. A Russian KAMAZ-5350 fuel tanker rolls through frozen ruts at walking pace, lights off, running on thermal silence. The driver knows the route. He has driven it 6 times this week. The rail terminal at Svatov is 40 kilometers behind him. The forward fuel point is 12 kilometers ahead. Between those two coordinates, according to Ukraine's General Staff reporting, 22 trucks just like this one will not complete their journey. Here is how a brigade running on cheap drones shut down a Russian armored battalion's rotation in 6 nights. The Luhansk front in late autumn 2025 is not the grinding urban war of Bakhmut or the open field attrition of Avdiivka. It is a logistics war. Russian forces holding the Kreminna-Svatov corridor depend on a supply chain that runs from railheads in the rear, down narrow forest roads, to forward positions where armored units rotate on a roughly 10-day cycle. Diesel is the blood of that system. A T-90M tank burns through hundreds of liters per operational day. An armored battalion requires continuous resupply just to stay stationary, let alone maneuver. Cut the fuel and the armor stops. Stop the armor and the rotation collapses. Collapse the rotation and the forward positions degrade. This is not theory. It is the operational logic that Ukraine's 414th Strike UAV Brigade, known by the call sign Magyar's Birds, reportedly applied over 6 consecutive nights in late October and early November 2025. The 414th is not a conventional infantry formation. Western analysts who track Ukrainian order of battle describe it as a purpose-built drone strike unit, one of several that emerged from Ukraine's rapid adaptation to drone warfare in 2023 and 2024. Its commander, known publicly by the call sign Magyar, built the unit around a philosophy that has since influenced Ukrainian drone doctrine across multiple brigades. The most valuable target is not the tank, it is the fuel that moves the tank. Destroying armor is expensive, difficult, and often inconclusive. Stranding armor by destroying its logistics chain is cheaper, faster, and strategically compounding. The losses do not just appear on Oryx's open-source equipment tracker. They cascade through an entire operational schedule. What strikes me about this approach is that it inverts conventional targeting logic entirely. Traditional air interdiction doctrine focuses on destroying the weapon systems themselves. What Magyar's Birds built is something closer to industrial sabotage at the operational level, using FPV drones and hexacopters instead of strategic bombers. The Svatovi-Kreminna supply corridor had been partially disrupted by HIMARS strikes in 2023 and early 2024, but Russian logistics planners adapted. They dispersed vehicles, shifted movement to nighttime, and relied on forest road networks that reduced radar and satellite detection. By mid-2025, open-source analysts tracking Russian vehicle movements through commercially available satellite imagery noted that fuel convoy patterns had stabilized into predictable nocturnal routes. The vehicles moved between 2100 and 0400 local time, clustered in groups of 3 to 5, spaced far enough apart to avoid a single artillery strike, taking out multiple vehicles at once. It was disciplined. It was also, as events would show, not disciplined enough. Ukrainian ISR: intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. In this sector relied on a layered approach by late 2025. Fixed-wing reconnaissance drones, operating at altitudes that made acoustic detection difficult, maintained persistent coverage of the primary forest road network east of Kreminna. Smaller quadcopter platforms provided close-in observation of specific choke points. River crossings, road junctions, sections where the forest canopy thinned and vehicles were briefly exposed. The intelligence picture that accumulated over roughly 2 weeks of observation, according to reporting from Ukrainian military media and OSINT analysts following the 414th's operational pattern, was precise. The convoy timing, the vehicle spacing. The rest stops where drivers paused engines. The single choke point, a shallow ford crossing a tributary of the Zarabets River, where vehicles were forced to slow to a crawl and bunch together within a window of roughly 40 seconds. The choke point mattered because of the vampire. A $500 FPV drone can destroy a $3 million T-90M, That asymmetry gets the attention. But the Vampire heavy bomber hexacopter, Ukraine's domestically produced multi-rotor strike platform, operates at a different point on the cost curve and with a different tactical logic. At roughly 4 to 6 kilograms of maximum payload capacity, the Vampire can carry ordnance that an FPV cannot. Modified thermite incendiary munitions, cluster-type anti-vehicle submunitions, or direct-drop modified artillery shells. Against a soft-skinned fuel tanker, the weapon of choice is incendiary. Diesel at operating temperature does not explode like gasoline. But diesel soaked in burning thermite at over 2,500 degrees Celsius does not stay liquid either. It burns. The truck burns with it. And a burning fuel tanker on a narrow forest road is, from a logistics disruption standpoint, worth far more than a destroyed one, because it blocks the road. Here is the tactical question worth sitting with. If Russian convoy commanders knew the choke point was being observed, and by night 3 of the operation, they had strong reason to suspect it, why did the convoys keep moving through it? What the drone team does with that answer is the operational insight that separates this from a simple interdiction campaign. The first night, according to Ukrainian military reporting, attributed to the 414th's own after-action summaries, a single Vampire hexacopter approached the choke point from the northeast, using the forest tree line as acoustic masking during its low-altitude transit. The drone team had calculated a 17-minute window between the departure of Russian observation drones, small quadcopters that Russian logistics units increasingly deploy ahead of convoys, and the arrival of the convoy's lead vehicle. That window was, in practice, 9 minutes usable. The Vampire reached its release position at an altitude of approximately 80 meters, confirmed the first vehicle in its thermal optics, and released its incendiary payload on the second truck in a 3-vehicle cluster. The reasoning was specific. The second vehicle, disabled and burning, would block both the lead vehicle's retreat and the following vehicle's advance. The choke point would do the rest. OSINT confirmed footage from the first night shows a tanker fire that burned for approximately 40 minutes, generating a thermal signature visible to Ukrainian reconnaissance drones monitoring from higher altitude. Russian response was a logistics vehicle that attempted to push the burning wreck off the road and was itself disabled, reportedly by a follow-on FPV strike, before completing the task. 2 vehicles confirmed destroyed. 1 road blocked. Convoy movement on that route ceased for approximately 6 hours. Night 2 introduced a problem. Russian convoy commanders, apparently aware that the choke point had been targeted, deployed a different route on the second night, a longer detour through deeper forest tracks that avoided the river ford. It added roughly 40 minutes to the transit time and was passable by KAMAZ trucks in dry autumn conditions. The 414th's ISR assets detected the route change within the first 2 hours. The drone team's response illustrates something about Ukrainian tactical adaptation that open-source analysts have noted repeatedly since 2023. The ability to adjust targeting solutions at the mission level without waiting for brigade-level approval by operators who have sufficient ISR access to observe, decide, and act within a single operational night. The Vampire team reoriented to the alternate route. They found its own choke point, a section where tree roots had damaged the road surface, forcing vehicles to drop to near walking pace over roughly 60 meters. By 23:40 on the second night, Ukrainian military reporting states, 3 tankers were burning on the alternate route. Russian convoys had traded one vulnerability for another. What is most surprising about this case is not that the drones found the alternate route. It is how quickly the targeting solution was rebuilt from scratch. Going through the open-source reporting on this operation, one detail kept standing out. The consistency of the vehicle loss pattern across all 6 nights suggested not improvisation, but a pre-planned decision tree. If Route A is blocked, target Route B here. If Route B is defended, fall back to C. The 414th appeared to have mapped the entire logistics network before the first strike, not just the primary choke point. Subscribe to Silent Echo. We break down a new frontline engagement every week. The tactics, the technology, the doctrine implications that the headline numbers don't show. By night 3, the operational pattern had shifted again. Russian forces introduced a new element: electronic warfare assets positioned to attempt jamming of Ukrainian FPV guidance signals on the primary approach corridors. FPV drones in the 414th inventory use a mix of analog video transmission and, in newer models, digital encrypted links. Jamming the analog FPV is achievable with sufficient EW equipment at close range. The Russian EW deployment on Night 3 successfully disrupted 2 FPV intercept attempts. The drones lost video feed and failed to complete their attack runs. For approximately 90 minutes, the convoy route was effectively defended. The 414th's response to the EW problem was to use the Vampire platforms, which operate on different frequency bands and at higher altitudes, as the primary strike asset, while FPVs transition to a bait and confirm role. FPVs would approach a convoy to trigger EW activation, burning the EW asset's resources on jamming a relatively cheap decoy, while a Vampire operating outside the effective jamming radius completed the actual strike from above. It was not a new concept. Ukrainian drone operators had developed EW countermeasures in multiple sectors throughout 2024. But its application in a sustained 6-night interdiction campaign against a single logistics corridor represented a refinement of the technique. Night 3 losses, attributed by Ukraine's general staff and supported by OSINT thermal imagery analysis. 4 tankers confirmed destroyed, 1 probable, 1 EW vehicle damaged. The road was blocked at 2 separate points simultaneously. Russian convoys did not move after 200 hours. Here is the read that will probably generate some disagreement. The Russian failure here was not primarily a failure of electronic warfare capability or logistics discipline. It was a failure of institutional adaptability. Each night, Russian commanders adjusted tactically: new routes, EW deployment, vehicle spacing changes. But each adjustment was reactive, implemented after the previous night's losses, and predictable within the constraints of the available road network. The 414th was not reacting to Russian moves. Russian logistics planners were reacting to the 414th. That asymmetry of initiative, more than any specific weapon system, is what produced 22 lost tankers in 6 nights. Put yourself in the position of a Russian logistics officer on Night 4. You have lost 9 vehicles in 3 nights. You have 2 viable road routes, both of which have been struck. Your EW assets attempted to protect one route and were themselves targeted. Your superiors are asking why the forward fuel point is running dry. Your armored battalion is reporting reduced fuel reserves. And you have another convoy to dispatch before dawn. What do you authorize? The answer, according to reporting on the operation's 4th and 5th nights, was a consolidation attempt. Larger convoys with more vehicles per run, calculated to deliver enough fuel in a single passage to offset the losses from strikes. The logic was that if a convoy loses 2 or 3 vehicles, a larger convoy delivers the remainder of its load while those vehicles burn. The per-vehicle loss rate stays constant, but the delivered fuel per convoy increases. It was not an unreasonable decision. It was wrong. A larger convoy at the same choke points means more vehicles in the slow transit window. The Vampire, dropping thermite payloads on a cluster of 5 vehicles bunched at the damaged road section, does not become less effective against a larger target set. It becomes more effective. Nights 4 and 5, Ukrainian General Staff reporting states, produced the highest single-night loss totals of the 6-night operation. Open-source analysts tracking the operation through satellite imagery and drone footage posted by Ukrainian military accounts counted multiple burning vehicle signatures per engagement window. By Night 5, intercept intelligence, the generic communications monitoring that Ukrainian forces routinely conduct against Russian tactical radio networks, reportedly showed convoy coordination messages expressing difficulty maintaining the fuel supply schedule. No named individuals. No specific intercepts quoted. The pattern was consistent with what analysts would expect from a logistics system under sustained attrition. Requests for route alternatives that did not exist. Reports of vehicles refusing to proceed after observing fires ahead, and indications that the forward fuel point was operating below minimum reserve thresholds. If you track this war seriously, you already see the pattern. The same sequence plays out across multiple sectors, with different weapon systems and different terrain, but the same underlying logic. Ukrainian tactical units find a logistics choke point, develop persistent ISR coverage of it, and apply cheap precision systems against expensive logistics infrastructure until the operational effect, not the tactical effect, the operational effect, becomes irreversible. The sixth night is where the operation's outcome became visible at a scale beyond individual vehicle losses. The armored battalion that had been drawing fuel from the targeted supply route, a unit whose specific composition was not confirmed in Ukrainian reporting, but whose presence in the Crimea axis was tracked by Western defense analysts, reportedly began its planned rotation on schedule and stalled. OSINT, confirmed satellite imagery from the days following the operation's conclusion, showed a cluster of armored vehicles in tree-line positions east of Crimea that had not moved during the normal rotation window. Western analysts assessing the imagery suggested the vehicles were stationary due to fuel constraints, though this assessment was appropriately hedged given the limitations of commercial satellite resolution in forested terrain. Ukraine's General Staff, in its daily operational summary covering the period, listed Russian fuel and logistics vehicle losses in the Luhansk direction that aligned with the totals attributed to the 414th operation. Open-source trackers monitoring the Oryx database and Ukrainian military reporting tallied figures consistent with the 22-vehicle total referenced in Ukrainian military media coverage of the 414th activities during this period. Each figure was attributed, hedged, and cross-referenced where OSINT evidence permitted. The numbers are not precise to the vehicle. They are consistent across multiple independent sources. What was precise was the operational outcome. A Russian armored battalion, comprising an estimated several dozen vehicles, was unable to complete its rotation for a period of days. The specific duration varies in different reporting, with some sources citing 3 days, others closer to 5, due to insufficient fuel at the forward point. During a rotation gap, positions are held by a unit that has already been on the line for its full rotation period, degrading combat effectiveness through fatigue, maintenance backlogs, and reduced readiness. The tactical advantage this creates for Ukrainian forces is not dramatic or immediately visible. It accumulates. The cost to Ukraine's 414th Brigade for the 6-night operation, based on Ukrainian military reporting which acknowledged drone losses without specifying exact numbers, included multiple FPV drones lost to jamming and to defensive fire, and at least one Vampire platform that did not return from a mission, either lost to Russian defensive systems or to a technical fault. The total materiel cost of Ukrainian assets expended in the operation is not publicly confirmed. Based on known production costs for Ukrainian FPV drones, approximately $400 to $600 each in late 2025, and estimates for Vampire platforms, the total Ukrainian equipment cost was likely measured in tens of thousands of dollars. The Russian losses, calculated at market replacement cost for KAMAZ 5350 military tanker variants and their fuel loads, represent losses likely measured in millions. The doctrine lesson is not that drones win wars. It is more specific than that. Persistent, adaptive, ISR, combined with low-cost precision strike, applied against a logistics system that has no tactical alternative route network, produces compounding operational effects that far exceed the cost of the weapon systems involved. The T-90M has a thermal sight, composite armor, and a crew trained to engage targets at 2 kilometers. None of those capabilities matter when the tank cannot move because the fuel truck that was supposed to reach it is a burned chassis on a forest road in Luhansk Oblast. There is one vehicle from the first night's strike that the drone footage shows peeling away from the convoy before the lead truck entered the choke point. It accelerated east, back toward Svatov, and the thermal track shows it clearing the ford before the Vampire released its payload. That vehicle survived. Why the drone team let it go, whether it was outside their targeting window, whether it was a deliberate decision, or whether it simply moved too fast, matters for understanding the operation's limits. A logistics system that loses 22 vehicles in 6 nights, but retains the route knowledge, the driver pool, and the command structure to reconstitute can rebuild faster than the weapons that destroyed it. Attrition works in both directions. The 414th demonstrated what persistent drone interdiction can achieve in a specific operational window. What Russian logistics planners do with the next 6 nights is the open question. What do you think? At what point does sustained drone interdiction force an operational-level logistics collapse versus simply displacing Russian supply routes to alternatives that are harder to target? Drop your read in the comments. The Luhansk fuel corridor is quieter now. The battalion that stalled in the tree line east of Kreminna eventually received resupply through a different route, according to subsequent satellite imagery analysis showing resumed armored vehicle movement. The 22 tankers are not replaced overnight. The institutional knowledge of exactly which choke points are observable and how drone teams think about decision trees for alternate routes is not unlearned. The 414th's 6 nights produced a specific operational outcome and a transferable tactical lesson. Both are already being studied by Ukrainian units preparing similar operations elsewhere on the front, and by Russian logistics commanders who now know that a predictable route is an observable route, and an observable route is a targetable one. The war in Luhansk Oblast continues. The cost asymmetry does not change, and somewhere northeast of Kreminna tonight, a reconnaissance drone is already mapping the next corridor